Hello and welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West, the show American grit meets British backbone. Tonight, too many across the political and media class are too squeamish, too right-on, or just too cowardly to talk about what's actually happening. Fear of being branded racist or getting cancelled or, frankly, blown up means we pussyfoot around the rise of Islamic extremism on our streets, in our courts and in our parliaments. The rise of political Islam in Britain has happened before our very eyes, but too many mouths have remained closed. Well, not on this show. Last month, the race in Victoria Park, organised by the East London Mosque, banned the participation of women. In Britain's inner cities, from Tower Hamlets to the north, Pro-Gaza MPs and sectarian movements are redrawing the political map. An alliance of Islamic fundamentalists, hard-left socialists and environmentalists threaten the stability of the British government from the hard left. And who are these new politicians? Well, let's meet one. Iqbal Mohammed, a British independent MP who ran on that pro-Palestine platform, claiming in a speech that the West is amongst one of the enemies to be faced.
So let's make a promise to each other to go to work together in unison. Let the West, let the enemies not divide us.
Let the enemies not divide us, the enemies including the West. So what's really going on and why? Joining me to discuss all of that live from Washington, D.C. is the Free Beacons, John Levine. John, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but first we're joined by Faith Matters, Fiyaz Mughal from London. Good evening, Fiyaz. What is going on? It seems to me, from where I'm sitting here in D.C., the rise of sectarianism in British politics is cantering at quite a pace now.
It is. I've been doing work pretty much on countering extremism since 7/7 with the government and successive governments in the UK. And I've never seen sectarianism and fractionation in our communities so bad. And actually, the reality is this kind of mentality, the mentality actually that the West is a problem, the West is a risk to Muslims, the West should be something that we do not adopt the values of. This kind of talk is really quite significant across parts of communities now. And it is really shameful to see elected members, elected leaders in our House of Commons, and even local authority members repeating this kind of divisive nonsense.
It feels to me that, the problem with Islamic extremism is I don't need to tell you, and you can tell our listeners and viewers in far more details than I possibly can, had been slightly separate to everyday politics. Obviously, the divisions and fractions in the British political system are increasing by the day, but it does seem to me there's now a concerted effort to bypass the traditional party system and actually launch a series of quite extremist MPs into the House of Commons. Is that organised or is that organic?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think there is some organisation behind it and a sense that actually MPs that can be launched with these kind of sectarian and highly divisive and even inflammatory perspectives are kind of representative of certain parts and certain regions of our country. There's that element, which is exceptionally, I would say, depressing given that kind of division. But there is also an organic set of movements which are, in effect, devolved of any engagement with community values, devolved of any engagement of national values, that sees things within the wider country as being problematic to them, that sees the values of wider society as being a threat to them. And within that segment lies the elements of the potential for radicalization. And we know when the radicalization happens, whilst it's not a clear trajectory, certainly radicalization is one significant factor that does actually lead at certain points for extremism and terrorism. So the reality is it's a bit of both.
In Tower Hamlets, though, it looks pretty coordinated. Lifter Rahman was mayor once. He was banned from public office for a period of time. He then relaunched his political movement and has completely dominated and taken over a large part of East London's local politics. There were 5 independent pro-Gaza MPs, the platform they stood on at the last election, but they came pretty close to taking out a number of Labour cabinet ministers, not least Wes Streeting, a man in the news tonight for his political machinations in Parliament. But a number of senior Labour figures are having this sort of this threat breathing down their necks. Who is funding it? Are they organised? And is there cause for concern that there could be threats to bypass the normal sort of democratic norms?
Well, the answer is there is nefarious financing going on here.
When you say nefarious financing, who is that?
Well, it's private individuals who've got a lot of money in these parts of community. So they're businessmen, mostly businessmen who have made money, who believe in this kind of ideology, this kind of thinking, this sense. Also, some of them thinking that, quote, Islam is under attack, so we must defend it. And defense means getting one of these elected members into parliament and starting to change opinion. So we've got businessmen who are wealthy, who are certainly donating to this, but we've also got to look at the wider network of what's happening internationally. Look, we got to keep our eyes and ears open. There are countries that are engaging in our local and national politics.
Which countries do you mean? Because I can think of, Pakistan being quite high on that list.
But Pakistan is certainly kind of high on that list. It's not the Pakistani government. Let me just make very clear around that. But certainly Islamist groups have enormous influence because of the language, the culture, engagement with diaspora communities here in the UK. But there are other countries in the Middle East who have actually, again, invested and given sums of money for social projects here in the UK. And again, those are problematic because they will deem Muslims like me, who are open-minded, liberal, totally, I don't feel disengaged from the West. The West is me. They will attack people like me. They will undermine. They will be well organised to come after us.
It happened directly to you, did it? When you were Michael Gove tried to appoint you as an advisory role in government, and you were threatened for that.
I was threatened by that. There were people who were mobbing me on social media. It was well organised. So go back to your point. This is well organised. Some of it is grassroots, but there is an organisation behind it. And let's not also miss the fundamental point. There are Islamists out there who want to see their values ingrained in certain parts and certain communities across our country. But they're not the only ones. There are people who kind of feel totally marginalised, who also actually kind of think, well, wider society is not a part of me. And again, they are potentially part of the issue going forward.
Can I get your response to the ITV Good Morning presenter Adil Ray, who posted on social media congratulating the new mayor of New York, Mandami, saying that some say Mandami may implement Sharia law. He might. The heart of Sharia law is social justice, welfare, fairness, charity and cohesion. He obviously landed in a bit of hot water of that. Can I get your response to that sort of mainstreaming of what 3, 5, 10 years ago would have been considered quite a radical view?
Indeed. I mean, when he was talking, I thought he was talking about some kind of really lovely affair of having tea and cakes in New York or something like that. It was a really lovely event. The reality is, how can anyone say that in today's modern values and look through the lens of that to effectively what are 7th, 8th and 9th century traditions? The reality is that's one way of looking at it, but let's look at the whole picture, because I know Sharia, there are elements that were progressive for the 7th, 8th and 9th century, which are not progressive for modern day life. And there are elements in there which are exceptionally cancerous, like attacks on LGBT communities and killing of them, like the potential to wipe out minorities, like women's rights. So for a presenter to say in 2025 through these lenses and goggles, oh, let's look at this schmaltzy, lovely thing, it's ludicrous. It is utterly ludicrous.
And how do we tackle it? You run an organisation that is designed to tackle extremism. It's similar, I believe, to the community trust that focuses on the Jewish community. When you've got daytime TV presenters mainstreaming, as you say, cancerous 8th century radicalism on the sofa of Britain's most watched television shows, we're through the looking glass now, aren't we?
Through the looking glass, right? This is mainstreamed. We are having people who are saying, then went on and said, oh, Sharia is not that bad. We have individuals now who are also trying to work with this government, which previous governments would not have touched with a barge pole because of their value systems. They're basically, unfortunately, I have to say this, basically the walls have opened up and we've got people coming in through the doors into seats of our government in terms of influence. But not only that, people in public life saying, oh, well, Sharia is all this cuddly, lovely, bubbly.
Mind-boggling.
It is utterly mind-boggling because actually, as a Muslim, you have to look at the totality of that law. It is 6th, 7th, 8th century stuff. Anyone looking at it in 2025 would think we can't even look at it through the lens of 2025, first of all. And if we do in the totality of it, there are some absolutely horrific elements. And we need to call them out.
Are we past the point of not being able to do that, though, in terms of, you say, they've infiltrated, the highest levels of public office. There is very powerful groups within government departments, for example. Take the Home Office, take the BBC, frankly, the other one, big one in the news today. Community groups within the organisations are basically trying to set editorial guidance. They're trying to, in the Home Office, restrict investigations into grooming gangs. Any attempts to fundamentally bring down immigration hostilely. We're in a situation where we've kind of lost control, right?
We're pretty much on that verge, I would say. We're pretty much on the verge of that because there's more of them speaking and engaging and getting into the system. And with this government being asleep at the helm of knowing who they're dealing with, to overlook things right in their eyes on social media, written by people they engage with in parts of my community who have actually openly suggested October 7th was absolutely fine, and the Labour government engages with them, right? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a government asleep at the wheel, and also willing to overlook because of political expediency, because they don't want to lose those seats, which they think they will lose anything between 5 and 10, maybe 15 other seats at the next election to independents coming through. So political expediency, asleep at the wheel, willing to overlook this is the problem as well.
Just to be clear, you're directly suggesting the Labour Party are turning a blind eye to extremism for fear of, people like Wes Streeting, who only had a majority of 500 at the last election, losing their seat. That's an incendiary situation.
Well, let me give you this example. If you are, how many times have frontline ministers in this government use the term Islamism? I can count probably on one hand the time they've used the term Islamism. Now, this is what we've come down to. Let's talk about cohesion. Let's talk about cuddliness. Let's talk about social cohesion. Let's not talk about Islamism and extremism and the Islamist narrative that has led to people being killed on our street. Let's not talk about that. So look at what we have right in front of us. If ministers are not openly speaking about it and only speaking on occasion about it versus the discussions in previous governments where to some degree they had a focus and then lost it on extremism, that in itself is telling.
How do we fix it, though? It's going to take, you say that this government is hamstrung by its political concerns. The last Labour government, the last Tory government had 14 years of sort of trying to deal with this. People like Michael Gove did try and take a stand, but he was shouted down and called racist. And, groups like Cage and MEND and even the Muslim Council of Britain all lined up to say how awful we are. I've written about these issues before countless times. I am bombarded with basically lawfare, which tries to sort of make it so complicated and so tedious to write anything about Muslim extremism in Britain without going complaints to the press regulator, complaints to Ofcom, complaints and letters to the editors. It seems to me that there's a sort of coordinated attempt to actually get to the situation we're in now and make sure that people like yourself don't go, hang on, what the hell are we doing here?
Precisely. Look, exactly that. I was speaking with a journalist the other day on a separate matter, and she said to me, I don't think I can go there on these matters of extremism. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people being frightened of litigation, to getting bogged down in paperwork and complaints. This is happening. You've spoken the truth. I've heard this from so many people. So the reality is, with the few opposition MPs we have from other parties, we need to actively watch out, challenge, consistently call out, watch for what's happening within government. Even in today's government, the discussions around the Islamophobia definition, which I've been against, and I've worked on tackling anti-Muslim hatred. I've worked 13 years at the front line of this, so I kind of know what I'm doing. The fact of the matter is, with this definition, which I'm against because the laws are more than enough and robust enough to tackle those issues, they produced a report which has been provided to the Secretary of State, and now I'm hearing people are going in and quietly having a look at it because they're going to be producing something around a definition. And you think to yourself, the government's not really transparent. The government's really trying in many different ways to keep their agenda under wraps. And actually, the more we can outline it, the more we can highlight what they're up to, the more we can challenge, the more we call out Islamist extremism and all types of extremism, the better.
Fiyaz Mughal, powerful words there. Thank you for joining us tonight, and all power to your elbow on that task. And frankly, I don't like having to say it, but stay safe in everything that you do. Thank you for joining us tonight. John Levine from the Washington Free Beacon is here in the studio with me. And what do you make of that?
I agree with everything that man said, and I hate to agree with you. I hope he has private security, because we're living in a very different world, and you've seen it in our country too, with people, unfortunately, like Charlie Kirk. And with radical Islam, it's even a more extreme, more dangerous threat. There have been so many political assassinations in Europe for people who have spoken out so bravely as your last guest. So I certainly hope he's taking all necessary precautions.
John, you were in New York the night that Mandami won. Well, he won fair and square.
I was a witness to the revolution.
He was elected fair and square by people that perhaps should have known better. But we'll park that issue for another day. He was all nice and soft and cuddly and, smiley and walking across Brooklyn Bridge with Bob Dylan lyrics playing in the campaign.
Right, that's always how.
Since then, the mayor of New York elect, he's not even in City Hall yet, but the mayor of New York elect has been a slightly grumpier figure. What did you give us where we're at?
You saw it immediately with his victory speech, and I was not allowed entry into Mamdani's party for obvious reasons, but I did head over to Cuomo's party, which was a lot more funereal. It was an open bar. It was amply attended, and Cuomo gave a very dignified concession speech. And I remember he said we need to work with Mamdani, and his own people booed him. And compare that to Zoran's victory speech, which was very ungracious. It was very uncharitable. And it was really sort of a political manifesto, and it was not talking about working with people. It was a lot of Arabic sprinkled in to his remarks as well. And I was talking to my friend, can you imagine if like a Jewish mayor of New York, like a Bloomberg, had just started whipping out some Hebrew in a speech or a victory speech like that? You'd never hear the end of it. And it was just very telling that the cuddly smiley face, I'm going to go to the gay club at 1 in the morning. It's all out the window now.
And then he went down to Puerto Rico, I think it was,
he was at a
over the weekend.
in Puerto Rico.
There he was in front of a crowd in mosques, people screaming Allah Akbar, and he was leading it. I didn't see that on the campaign.
Yeah, Allah Akbar. A line. It's a joke, but it's not really a joke. Has anything good ever happened after somebody shouted Allah Akbar?
I mean, let's leaving aside that. Okay. Your words, not mine. There.
Okay.
But, I don't want to get cancelled or blown up. Okay. But no, frankly, look, we talked at length there with Fiyaz about this situation in London. Large parts of East London are now basically being run by extremist fundamentalists. infiltration of the normal political system by people with extreme views, daytime TV hosts talking about Sharia law. That's London. I mean, part of the element of the stuff we're trying to do with this show, as you well know, is looking at warnings from the old country for America. Where in America, and I'm beyond sort of New York and sort of Dearborn, Michigan, do we see this level of sectarian politics infiltrating the American system?
I'll tell you, the name of the town escapes me, but it was a small town in Minnesota that in 2023 they elected for the first time ever an all-Muslim city council. And it's a mostly non-Muslim town. It was one of these like triumphs of progressivism. Look how progressive we are. It's all just a bunch of white Christians, but we've elected a Muslim city council. And the first thing they did was take down all the gay pride flags off all the public buildings. And it just shows you there is this alliance between the far left and radical Islam for which the common denominator is hatred of the West.
Yeah.
But if that alliance ever comes into power, the blue-haired psychos on the left, they get put against a wall. Well, that always happens.
I mean, that's already happening in the UK. Is actually the trans issue is going to be the one that really blows this.
Right. Do you think the Islamists and the trans who are on the same side now?
Well, it's like gays for Gaza, right?
It's like, and do you think if the gays for Gaza ever win that argument, they're going to end up so well? I don't think so. This happened in Iran.
But why? I mean, that's kind of what. Fiyaz said was you kind of want to bang our heads against the wall of how have we got to this position and what do we do to get out of it? Because it seems to me like, as I said there, we are through the looking glass.
You got into this position, and we're heading into this position because we've imported millions of people into our countries who hate us and hate our values and do not want to assimilate, and instead want you and me and our countries to become more like the countries that they left. And Douglas Murray has a great line. You do not have to extend toleration and acceptance to people who would not extend that to you.
Presumably the Trump White House, though, isn't bound in the same way as far as we're saying the Labour Party and the Labour government in Britain, Keir Starmer's government, is basically a hostage to political fortune and is kowtowing to Islamic fundamentalists because they don't want to lose their seats.
Well, no, but as I've always said, the longer you ignore the problem, the harder it is to fix. For example, President Trump can get rid of visas. He can even do stuff on green card holders. Fine, that's easy. But what do you do with, say, recently naturalized citizens? Someone like Mehdi Hassan, who is a citizen of the United States now. And he was someone that could have been deported a few years ago, but he was naturalized, and now he's a citizen. And now he'll be able to spread his poison and anti-Western invective, which is very well documented in your country and mine. And he'll be able to do that with the protection of American citizenship. But it's very, very hard now to deal with a problem like Mehdi Hassan. And the longer you don't deal with a problem in your country or mine, the more these kind of ideologies can take root. They will have children, they'll start families, and you'll have people raised from the cradle in your country who will say, I go back to where? Birmingham? But they will in fact not be from Birmingham. And they will not really be part of your polity.
I mean, there's an open invitation to Mehdi Hassan to come on this show, as he well knows, at any point to answer some of those points John raises there. But again, it's the political correctness of it, wasn't it? When we say, the attacker was British born or the attacker was American born. Yes, they were, but so were the 7/7 bombers. So were pretty much every Islamic terrorist who, the people that cut off Fusilier Ligby's head in Woolwich. I mean, there does need to seem to be, we're sort of tied up in political correctness that basically means we're having this bizarre conversations where we're basically saying that, if I moved to Japan, I would not become Japanese, right?
Right. The last time I was on this show, there was a British-born there was a terrorist attack in your country.
Indeed, there was.
A British-born person,
named
and
Jihad.
His name was Jihad.
Yeah.
So this British-born business, we have to just take our heads out of the sand a little bit. And it's funny, these politicians who've been elected in your country, the Free Gaza, Free Palestine politicians. I hope your people are starting to wake up to the fact that that program comes with a lot more than just Gaza and Palestine. They're going to have a lot of ideas for what your country should look like as well. And I don't think you're going to like it. I don't think a lot of your people who watch this show are going to like it.
John Levine, stay there. We're going to move on. Staying with Britain, sort of. The BBC's still ongoing. legal headache. Donald Trump's threatened to sue the BBC, as we discussed at some length yesterday, for $1 billion after he was caught faking the president's words in that now infamous documentary about January 6th. Looks like a grovelling apology may be the starting point, but could the world's most famous broadcaster really end up in a Florida courtroom? Joining me tonight is Republican lawyer and strategist Mehek Cooke. Good evening, Ms. Cooke. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Is this another one of Donald Trump's sort of threats where he says, $1 billion, and then actually the whole case slightly falls apart? Are we really going to see the BBC in a Florida courtroom? Or, I don't think he'd have much truck in London trying to get $1 billion off a state broadcaster.
Well, I think President Trump is very serious because this was election interference days before the election where you're manipulating voters and everybody wants to say, BBC, you're only watching it in the UK. No, we're actually watching it here in America because of social media and the way that clips go viral. So you have two separate clips of President Trump speaking that the BBC decided to put together to make it seem like the president was inciting violence. Any American watching that would think, gosh, I shouldn't vote for President Trump. Many of us did further research and debunk that. So yes, President Trump is serious. I also think at the end of the day, this is not just about this legal case, but about accountability. And he's already gotten it with an apology and two executives stepping down.
So he's gone after CBS, he's gone after the New York Times, he's gone after the Wall Street Journal, he's gone after all sorts of media organizations. No one seems to be spared. The New York Times basically told him to jog on, essentially, and they wouldn't be backing down. What do you expect the BBC to do, given this is a sort of plucky Britain versus the Trump White House? How do you think it would go down if Friday 5 o'clock comes and the BBC say, thank you, but no thank you, no dice?
I don't think the BBC is going to do that because you've already seen two major executives actually fold and crumble under the pressure. And when you have an independent analysis and somebody's saying, hey, do not put this documentary out, you're spreading lies, and you still do the worst thing for the BBC right now, it's not even this legal case, it is discovery. And that will be shocking and damning because so many execs, mark my words, were involved in this cover up. So I think what the BBC should do, my legal advice to them, is to crumble and figure out a settlement where they make President Trump whole. And we continue to show that media will always win through the truth. That's what we need today. That's what the president is demanding of every single news outlet. Love them or hate it, we want the truth. For
our viewers and listeners in the UK, we're a mixed audience here. Can you just run us through how that process would work in a Florida courtroom? London is a little bit trickier, and I don't think the libel bar is quite high, and it's also it also involves much smaller sums of money. But if the president was to pursue, as he is threatening, the BBC through Florida, how would it work, and what are the possible outcomes?
So I think a legal case in Florida, generally when you're talking about a public figure like President Trump or any other public figure, you have to prove actual malice, proof that the BBC knew or recklessly discarded the truth and created a false impression. So you actually have to show harm. And then it's about reputational and economic harm. Here, the fact that you had an independent analysis and a report saying this is not accurate, this will cause harm. And now the BBC has actually said, yes, we're sorry, we made a mistake. That's enough, in my opinion, to show malice. Now, what the BBC is going to argue is First Amendment. We're a news organization, and in Florida, this is one of the strongest states for the news media and First Amendment. So it may be harder to prove and for President Trump to win, but I think this win comes down to a settlement, like I said, because discovery will be damning for the BBC and accountability, which we're already getting as they are seeing executives resign, and I think there'll be many more.
$1 billion is a sixth of the turnover of the entire organisation. Obviously, he threatened CBS with a similar size bill, but they ended up settling for, I think, around $26 million. Where do you suspect this would actually end up if they do settle?
I think it'll be in the millions, but at the end of the day, if you think about the election, and if BBC had tipped the scale and many Americans didn't do their research, we'd be looking at Kamala Harris and not President Trump. So the truth matters, journalism matters, and the fact that President Trump has asked for $1 billion is because he has staked everything in his election and then getting reelected, and for BBC or any other news outlet to spread vile lies that continue to daunt him through even this election when we talked about January 6th, it's just despicable.
Ms. Cooke, stay there. I'm going to bring in John Levine from the Washington Free Beacon. John, I mean, suing the BBC, on that point there, suing the BBC makes for good headlines, but this is actually a president who actually hasn't had a huge amount of time before he potentially is in hock to Congress, before he becomes a sort of lame duck, before the cycle moves on to who's next. It's all very well throwing these lawsuits around, but, actually, is this not just a distraction from the day-to-day running of the country?
Well, the president sues a lot of news organizations, as you mentioned, and some of them are much less legitimate than others. And maybe this one has more merit than his suit against the Wall Street Journal for the Epstein letter, which they later did produce. But to your point, I wish he would be running the country more. I think it kind of is undignified, the office of the president, to be launching lawsuits against media organizations. If he wins any money from the BBC, correct me if I'm wrong, that's your taxpayer money that will be coming into the United States. So I feel bad that we're milking you a little bit for that. And I think the BBC, multiple executives have now resigned. I think they clearly realize the error that they made. And as a member of the media, I don't love the idea of launching lawsuits against the press in general. I think self-regulation and press freedom is a better way to go.
It feels to me, John, since last Tuesday, was it already? Last Tuesday's sort of minimal but sort of very powerful electoral tonking that the Republicans received in New Jersey, in Virginia, in New York. It does feel like there's been a more and more disquiet amongst Donald Trump supporters. Even J.D. Vance, the vice president, was quick out the traps last Wednesday to say we need to be focusing on the home turf. Right. There's some MAGA disquiet around a lot of the tariff policy, a lot of the foreign policy. Rumblings are starting that actually this is a president too focused on his own, on his peace prize, on his lawsuits, on foreign affairs, than actually fixing some of the things that he promised to do on the campaign trail. Are you picking up on that?
I mean, we've had a government shutdown for the last 40 days, and during that time, we've been talking about a ballroom we're building and remodeling the Lincoln bedroom bathroom. And I'm very impressed by President Trump's work on overseas peace plan, solving 7 wars. I don't know how many wars it is now. But the fact is, Mamdani was able to win in New York because of a single-minded focus on affordability and the cost of living. And if Americans are struggling to buy basic necessities, peace in the Middle East, peace between Pakistan and India, these are secondary concerns. And so I think that these elections were a wake-up call that Republicans do need to look more inward at what are the problems affecting Americans day to day and adjust accordingly.
Ms. Cooke, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? The GOP want to win next year. You're a strategist. It's not about the court cases or the peace prizes. It's about affordability, the cost of eggs, the cost of living, putting dollars back in pockets. The president was on Fox last night saying, he's got polls that everything's going gangbusters and gasoline is cheap, so everything's fine. But inflation's ticking up the wrong way still. And, the price of things is genuinely unaffordable for millions of Americans.
Well, there's no doubt that Biden created inflation, the worst inflation we saw in 40 years, and President Trump can't just flip a switch. But what he's trying to do is create policies, not only on the economic front, but the trade front, the safety front. All of this will bring prosperity. Working families are getting squeezed. Life is more expensive, but prices didn't raise on their own. This is what happens when you have government intervention. Washington pushed this on us, and what President Trump is trying to do is deregulate. Do you know, under Joe Biden, he pushed over 3,200 rules a year, which is the major rules were 300. That is costing the American people billions of dollars. That's the rise in price today. So what President Trump is doing is creating a regulatory framework where he's driving the cost of energy down, oil prices down, and so much more.
Is he doing
That's going to take time, though.
Yeah, but
that doesn't happen overnight.
Time is not something he really has, though. I mean, we're 10 months, 11 months into this administration. We're already talking about the midterms already. We're already talking about 2028, frankly. Has he spent the first 10 months in office, second time round, on the right priorities, or do all these MAGA influences, we're going to talk about Ben Shapiro in a moment, but all these MAGA influencers who are popping up to say, hang on, we're getting this wrong, including the influencer that's sitting in the VP's office, has he had his priorities right so far?
I think he has. He's focused on the economy while focusing on defense and international security and making sure he's bringing prosperity. Look, if we have foreign wars, the pressure is on the United States. So he has cleared the decks to make sure that we're not fighting 8 different wars. We now have peace so he can focus on the House front. And the House front was making sure we get fair trade deals. And I know all of this is happening at once, but the truth is that the tariffs have not only worked, President Trump is promising $2,000 to middle-class families. He's trying to rebuild the economy that Joe Biden destroyed. And under Biden, $47,000 is the hit that families took in the last 4 years. So President Trump is working on overtime. I think everybody wants him to just work on one thing and get an applause. He works on a multifaceted front, something that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could never do.
Enough hits on Joe Biden. He's not the president anymore. Mehek Cooke, Republican strategist, thank you for joining us. John's staying with us. We're going to carry on this conversation after this. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You won't miss a thing. There's lots of goodies there you won't get anywhere else. So just search Harry Cole Saves the West and hit the subscribe button. It's like there, I think. Anyway, still with me in the studio is John Levine. And joining us is our friend of the show, commentator Adrian Gray. Welcome back. Now weekly appearance on Harry Cole Saves the West. Just to stick with that subject that we were discussing there before the break, John. Ben Shapiro's out and about and saying, look, you know, a man of many opinions, but even Tucker Carlson's saying this, and a lot of other sort of, you know, figures of the right are saying, well, how can you blame the kids for voting for someone like Mandami when, you know, they don't feel like they have a stake in capitalism? They're saddled in debt that the government encouraged them to, you know, sign up for a worthless college degree. They can't get a job, they can't get a house, they can't get a wife, they can't get a car. And it's like, well, you know, why not? Why not give it a whirl? Why not go for the bearded guy who's promising free stuff?
Well, I mean, those are all real issues, but we have to think about solutions, and this is why I think it's very dangerous for Republicans to just abandon those kitchen table issues to Democrats and just to ignore them
abandon the kids and say, well, the kids are left.
Yeah, the kids are not all right. The kids are graduating from college and they can't find any work. The home that their parents bought for, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000 is now worth $800,000. Yeah. There's no chance that they can possibly live in the neighborhood they grew up in. And I think part of it is also we need to have a more honest conversation with kids too and be like, maybe you should leave New York if it's too expensive to live in. Move to a more affordable city. The story of America is if it's too expensive, go west. And we went west and we had pioneers and we settled California. And you know, you don't have to live in New York City. Go live in Nashville. Go live in Austin. There are more affordable cities where you can make your mark and start your own path. And we just got to be honest with the kids and give them some hope.
Adrian, on that exact point, is the White House slightly, we've used asleep at the wheel as an expression already on this show about something else, but it does seem to me that there's people within the wider movement are slightly ringing the alarm bells of saying, actually, the White House needs to get back to bread and butter kitchen table issues, back to the economy, back to the cost of living, and enough with the jet setting. Let's actually, you know, in the run up to the midterms, be focusing on what matters to normal American voters.
Yeah, I believe that. I also have an interesting take. As a millennial, I've been hearing this narrative since we graduated college.
Well,
we couldn't find a job.
We couldn't find into the worst economy.
We couldn't find a job. We were in our parents' basement. We had student loans, and we were making it out. I think there's a distinction here. You know, Ben Shapiro's video, he says, you know, if you can't afford it, then you should move. That was taken out of context. I believe people using that as a blanket statement, meaning like, well, you don't deserve to live anywhere. And it's like, what we really need to look at and analyze is not only like, do you deserve to live in the 1% location if you're not making the 1% salary? Because I certainly couldn't now live in the area that I grew up in because I couldn't afford that at the time, right? So I had to move farther out. And so we also need to look at, I believe, consumerism, social media, and a lot of people feel like they should have these $1 million houses based on what we're seeing online. And a lot of home builders are building these places with the best finishes, and that's driving prices up as well. So I feel like this is a multi-layered issue.
John, just before we move on, has the message been received by the White House, do you think? Are they in listening mode?
Oh, yeah.
They get it, right?
I think they saw the results of the elections, and I think Trump, despite what he says, has a lot of respect for Mamdani. The term is game recognizes game.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't agree with anything he's doing, but there's a reason he won, and I do believe you're going to start hearing a lot more about affordability in the next year.
Very, very good. Adrian, Sydney Sweeney, a topic of conversation greatly covered by this important show. Obviously, she was out and about. We talked about it last week. She was out and about with GQ. She has become, once again, a massive sensation on the internet for refusing to go down the progressive reporter's line of questioning and sort of, self-flagellate and apologise for making a joke about starring in an advert that made a joke about her having good genes. Now, back to the day job for Sydney this week. Her latest movie has bombed. Conspiracy, or was it just a crap film?
I think there's a little bit of both here going on. I think everybody's ready to blame the left in Hollywood, which, listen, nobody loves doing that more than me, as you know. But I also feel like there was a little bit of a low marketing budget, but I want to say something that might be unpopular, but her role in this movie may not be attracting the crowd because she's not necessarily playing,
a
Euphoria, a Sydney Sweeney, what people are usually going to see her as. Not playing
a female boxer.
Exactly.
For people that haven't seen, this is the film Christie, where it seems the trailers and clips I've seen from it so far just seem to be involves Sydney Sweeney getting beaten up and beating people up for the entire movie, which might not be the best. Movie.
I had a lot of friends actually tell me they didn't realize those photos that the marketing online was her. They didn't know who the actor was.
So you think that the haters are jumping on, screaming, "Oh look, she's ruined her career. She's now box office poison because she's shown a tiny bit of ankle, should we say, to the right, to the MAGA movement, refusing to sort of disavow that. She's now poisoned across America." You think that's nonsense?
I think it's a little bit of nonsense. I think, again, her brand, and we've seen this with a lot of celebrities, when they have a certain look, it's hard to kind of transfer that into other acting roles. It's not the popular opinion to say out loud, but that's just my take.
John, Oscar Isaac and another lovey's been out on return. He's saying he's refusing to return to Star Wars until Disney figure it out and not succumb to fascism. He was talking about Jimmy Kimmel's week-long suspension he managed before he was sort of reinstated. Are we back into the world where we have to listen to these people? I thought after Kamala Harris's $1 billion disaster and signed up all these people to tell everyone how evil Donald Trump was, these people would just go away and have a long cold bath. But they're back, right? Fascism
I don't know
on the table.
I know, our country flirted with fascism for a whole week. It was a scary week. we went fascist for a week, but now we're all back to normal. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever be rid of them. It's just a question of whether we will listen to it and we will allow it to impact our lives and our behaviors. And frankly, there hasn't been a good Star Wars during the entire period it's been owned by Disney.
Rogue One was pretty good. Rogue One was basically a Vietnam film set in space. It was amazing.
I don't even remember which one that was.
Anyway, back here. We've got 2 minutes.
But no, we're always going to have these people. It's really on us to whether we give them quarter, we give them license.
But yeah, when we kind of Jimmy. So that was amazing. What Jimmy Kimmel's wife was out today, and he's saying that when they had to break it to the poor starving Kimmel children, that Daddy had been suspended from TV, and the Harry Cole Saves the West made up prize of the year or something that did not happen was little Kimmy Jr. Turned up and said, "Daddy, did the president do this?" Just go away.
I sent a message to the Babylon Bee guys, and I was like, I hate that you didn't think of this.
Adrian, are we in a post-Hollywood age where, in fact, these lovies can pontificate, but frankly, from everyone from Sydney Sweeney down, has just said, you know what, jog on.
It's totally crazy. Look, Jimmy Kimmel, I think his wife also said that she reached out to family and friends to kind of to basically say, hey, don't vote for this guy. And she said 90% of them either didn't answer her or said she was crazy. So that should tell you right there, she felt the temperature in the room. So again, I think, Oscar Isaac, I think he would be very happy with the Gina Carano cancellation era, but we're over that.
It feels, when we just discussed at length, it feels like that sort of blip of the beginning of this decade, certainly, and the end of the last decade will go down in history as one of the sort of strangest moments. Their power is waning, as Sydney Sweeney proves.
Right.
Absolutely. But also, we don't have to have Oscar Isaac in a Star Wars movie. It's not like there's a law that if he's in it, if he's not in the movie, there can't be
But we
Star
need more
Wars.
Sydney Sweeney films where she's not getting...
of course.
By other women. Yeah. John Levine from Washington Free Beacon, thank you for joining us. It's been a lively, interesting night. Covered a lot of ground. Adrian Gray, always welcome. See you both again soon. That was Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.